There are a lot of elements people want in a Class B van, from ample storage space to staying cool in hot weather. And these are, of course, things to consider. But these are very specific issues, and this video would be very long if we had to discuss every single thing people find important. Maybe it would be better to approach this with a broader stroke. With this in mind, I've divided aspects of importance into three different categories: tall, grande, and no, that's not it. Oh yeah, layout, comfort, and energy. That's them. You may want to look at my previous video that discusses needs and wants before you watch this one. There's a link in the description. I'll wait. Oh, back already? Good. Now that we're clear on what a need is, let's consider the aspects I talked about earlier. The layout of a van creates a living space for those using it. If it's just one person, you may want to design it with a smaller sleeping area and with more space devoted to storage or a kitchen. In our case, we needed sleeping areas for 3 people. We also have a dog, so that's 4 living beings that need to fit comfortably in a 22-foot-long van. Not an easy design task. Our embassy layout does a good job of it, though. We have the transit driver and passenger seats, as well as a sofa that includes belts, so we can secure up to 4 people as we travel. The dog can also be secured with her leash, so there you go. Beyond that, we have the bed in the back that sleeps 2, and the sofa comes out to sleep 2 as well. This means we have sleeping areas for the humans in our group. The dog does just fine in the hall between these areas. Of course, she may sleep in other areas as well. The big drawback of this design is a smaller kitchen and a less than roomy hall between the front and the back. These areas can get a little tight, but again, the van is only 22 feet long, so you can't have everything. We also have floor-to-ceiling storage areas, which is great to store both winter and summer wear all year long. I've seen a lot of van designs that just don't have a lot of storage space, and that would be less than ideal for us. But with that advantage is a disadvantage: fewer windows. Yeah, I know it looks like big windows from this vantage point, but when you get inside, not so much. If you want a truly open feel like big windows, you have to sacrifice something, and that's usually storage space, so be aware of this on your search. Understand there is only so much space in a cargo van, and this space can't be enlarged or shifted around, so RV designers have limits on what they can do with Class B floor plans. To be truthful, I don't believe our layout would work well if we were full-time in the van, but then again, I've never seen any Class B sized van I would consider comfortable full-time with 3 people and a dog, so no surprises there. But for our style of travel, getting out there for only a few weeks, the layout of our Class B embassy does just fine. If you're considering longer trips or even going full-time with a family, you may be looking at a Class C or larger. Again, that would be a compromise, as the greater amount of space also means a larger, not-so-stealth vehicle, but you can't have it all. I've recently found an interesting design that uses slide-outs with a standard Class B van design, providing a lot more space when those slides are actually out. The disadvantage would be upkeep of those slide-out mechanics, another thing that may break down at some point. There are always compromises. When I think of comfort in an RV, I'm talking about being comfortable in different kinds of weather. In other words, temperature control. And a large part of that control comes from insulation. You could have the most powerful air conditioner in existence, but if your RV doesn't have proper insulation, that lower temperature isn't going to last. The second you turn off that AC, your temperature will change quickly. Insulation is what keeps that temperature steady for longer periods of time, reducing heat transfer. Of course, if you're plugged into an external power source like an RV park outlet, you can probably run that AC all day and night. But I'm not sure how the owners of the park will feel about you using all that electricity. Although I haven't experienced it myself, I've heard that some RV parks are starting to meter energy use and charging accordingly. I think with the advent of hybrid and electric vehicles, that is going to become a lot more common, so be aware of that potential additional cost. Our embassy has 8 layers of aircraft insulation, which does a great job of keeping us warm in very cold weather and nice and cool in hot summers too. There are many other types of insulation out there that can be just as effective, so it's important to really review how well that insulation works in whatever RV you decide to purchase. Also note the number of heat transfer points, like windows. The more windows you have, the nicer views you get, but also the more difficult it is to insulate that RV. And that brings us to the final requirement, energy. I have saved this for last since it's, in my opinion, the most important one. Energy covers not only the power you have in the RV, but how that power is used. In our case, we have 2 460 amp lithium batteries for a total of 920 amps. But that isn't the whole story. A lot of vans nowadays come with a lot of power, some with even bigger batteries than ours, or a generator that can be powered up when needed, or maybe they use propane for heating or cooking. A lot of options out there. So power isn't necessarily a concern with modern Class B vans, but again, power isn't the only thing you need to consider. In our case, we didn't want to have to deal with the noise of a generator or having to find and fill up with propane, so we have neither. Now I get it. Some people want various backup systems in their van to feel secure or safe or whatever. But our reasoning was this. Before we had the RV, we traveled by car. It uses a battery for the electrical components and gasoline to power the engine. If we run out of gas, we don't have a backup system. We just have to go fill up with gas. If our battery is having issues, guess what? We replace the battery. We have something to jump the battery to start it, but no generator to fully charge the battery until we can replace it. And yet, this isn't a concern. For the most part, we're near gas stations and repair shops because we travel in North America and facilities are all over the place. In the case of our RV, we have lithium batteries to power everything, and we don't have a generator for backup. Our heating system uses the gasoline from the tank for power, so as long as we have access to a gas station, no issues for heat. If the lithium batteries fail for whatever reason, yes, we would have no AC. But guess what? The lithium batteries failed. That is a major issue no matter what backup systems you have. I sure wouldn't be continuing on a trip just using a generator or propane. I'd be searching for someone to repair the battery issue. The trip would have to be on hold no matter what. So I do understand there are some advantages to having other power systems in a van, but I don't believe having to deal with the noise of a generator or having to find and fill up with propane is worth it for, well, our needs. And that's the operative word, needs. Your needs may be very different from ours, and that will decide what systems will make you most comfortable. Since we rely on lithium batteries, it's important to talk about the voltage used. The system in an RV may be 12 volt, 24 volt, or even 48 volt. If you want to move a lot of power from point A to point B, like when charging your battery, you need either a lot of volts or a lot of amps, since volts times amps equals watts, or power. The amount of amps you can move will depend on the size of your wiring. A lot of amps will need the space to move from point A to B. In other words, if I need to move 2400 watts of power in a 12 volt system, I need 200 amps to do so. And the wiring needs to be thick enough to handle that many amps. Kind of like pushing milk through a straw. To push a lot of milk, I need a bigger straw. In a 24 volt system, you only need 100 amps to get your 2400 watts. And in a 48 volt system, only 50 amps to get that same 2400 watts of power. So you can have thinner wire. Since there are more amps that need to be moved through the wiring in a 12 volt system, the wiring needs to be thicker, and at some point the wiring would just be too thick to use effectively. Because of this, both 24 and 48 volt systems can be more efficient than 12 volt systems. That power can essentially travel farther on thinner wires with less loss of power. A rough analogy would be trains. Voltage would be the pressure or force you create with your train, while amps is how much cargo can go down the track. So a 12 volt system is much like a hand car. You have to do a lot of hand pumping to go down that track. You're going to get tired and not go as far as efficiently, so it will take longer to move from point to point. You can think of this like the amount of time it takes to charge your batteries. It takes longer in a 12 volt system because you can't push as many amps down the wire, so it takes longer to charge the battery. The 24 volt system, on the other hand, is more efficient, like a steam engine. You're hauling your amps down that track, so charge time is reduced. And the 48 volt system is like a modern, sleek, fast train. So your charge time is even less, while efficiency is increased. You don't get tired and you can go even farther. The biggest drawback with higher voltage systems is converting that power to something usable. All voltage systems use inverters so they can power 120 volt appliances, like your microwave oven. You have to convert whatever voltage you have, be it 12, 24, or 48 volt DC, to 120 volt AC, like what is used in your household plugs. But 24 and 48 volt systems also need a DC to DC converter, reducing the voltage to power anything that is 12 volt, like RV lights, refrigerators, and fans. 12 volt systems don't need a DC to DC converter since they are already 12 volt. This means both the 24 and the 48 volt systems need an inverter and a converter turned on most of the time to power anything. And these things need power just to run. This means some of those watts you have aren't powering your appliances. They're powering things that convert volts so you can power your appliances. A 12 volt system only needs an inverter. In our case, if we turn on our inverter without powering anything at all, the inverter will use about 20 watts of power just being turned on. Some inverters are worse, using 30, 40, or even more watts per hour. So if you leave an inverter on, you're draining your battery even if everything else is off. Whenever an inverter is needed to power an appliance, like the 120 AC microwave, it uses about 10% of the energy of that appliance to convert the energy to whatever it's powering. So if you're using an 800 watt microwave oven, you need about an additional 80 watts to run that inverter. So you're actually using 880 watts of power for that appliance. You don't use microwave ovens that much or for very long, so not too much of a power drain. But if you use a 120 volt air conditioner a lot in the summer, that inverter needs to be on as long as that air conditioner is running. You could easily be using 1,000 or more watts with that air conditioner on, which is an additional 100 watts of power used by the inverter each hour, which adds up quickly. If your air conditioner is 12 volt like ours is, no need for the inverter to be on at all. This means our battery lasts longer because it isn't using watts to power an inverter. As a matter of fact, the only thing that needs an inverter on are, in our van at least, are the household plugs, the microwave, which is plugged into a household plug, and the TV antenna, also plugged into the household plug. And of course, we don't need a converter to change the voltage, as our battery system is already 12 volts. So everything else that uses 12 volts just gets power directly from the batteries, without having to go through a converter first. In essence, we don't need a converter, and we rarely use our inverter. We gain hours of runtime just by leaving our inverter off, and that equates to more energy when we need it. Please understand, none of this means one system is better than another. They are just different solutions to a common problem. Each has advantages, but also disadvantages. You will need to decide what best applies for your needs. Also remember, These requirements are my thoughts on what is most important for us in a Class B van. You may find other issues far more relevant, like being able to travel on rough terrain, or storage for bikes or paddle boards, or whatever floats your boat. Your style of travel, and for that matter, the entire reason you travel, will determine the most important requirements for you. So consider what needs you may have, then consider if a Class B will fulfill those needs. If so, start looking at different models out there, and hopefully you'll find the one that best fulfills those general requirements you have for the best RV experience. Be seeing you.